In the era of cloud computing, security has become a critical concern. We often hear about security by design, DevSecOps, zero trust security, and so on. That take us to the question on how to secure our applications before moving to the cloud. And one of the most recurring questions is securing our connection string. This will be applicable for our databases or our backend services like AI search. In today's video, I will show you in a step-by-step guide all the most popular options in order to secure your application and go secure to the cloud the most effective way. My name is Bilal Marwan. I'm Cloud Technical Architect and Microsoft Certified Trainer. Before we start, let's understand what's the connection string. So the connection string, this will highlight or describe the backend service, how to connect to it. So this will provide information like the server name, the username, the database, the password, and some switches like encryption and so on. So in other words, the connection string, this is the definition of our backend service. So for our today's video, I have already prepared an app service along with its database. Let's jump to the Azure portal to show you what I've prepared. So here I've created an app service on Azure, which is called CS option, connection string options, with its database. This is a really basic sample. I'm using an ASP.NET application that will create a to-do list. So that will be allowing us to create a task, edit it, and delete it. So this is a really basic code sample that we can find on Microsoft GitHub repository. Let's go to our app service, click on it, and then click browse. This is the application. So this is running on app service. This will allow us to create a new item. Let's give it a description. So this will be task 1. We are on 27th on December 2024 and click create. So this is the first task has been created. Let's go ahead and check on the database how it's created. So this is my database and the query editor. For the moment, I'm using the SQL authentication, and in the tables, do to, and let's edit data. So this is the task. So task 1, it got the ID 3. I have already tested the application to make sure that everything is working properly. And this is the creation date. This brings us to the first option of connection string. So let's jump to the code. And here in our app settings JSON, we have referenced our connection string, my connection, the server, and the database. We did put the username and password within the code itself. So this option is acceptable in development environment, and this is really forbidden in production. Then when we move on to production servers and to the SQL database server of the production, we need to carry out the connection string out of our code, protect it somewhere else. So let's check together how to do the next option, which is reference the connection string on the app service itself. So this is a built-in feature on app service that will provide us the ability to create a variable environment directly on the app service that will help us protect our connection string. So let's take this connection string, copy it, and then go to our app server. In the environment variables, we go to connection strings, we add a new variable, we will give it a name Azure SQL connection string. The value, this will be the value that we had, and then we will tell this is a SQL Azure. So as you can see here, we have different options of connection string like MySQL, SQL Server, which is a regular SQL Server, or SQL Azure, PostgreSQL, and so on. Select and click apply, confirm the changes, and in a couple of seconds, the application should take into consideration this environment variable. So next, we need to update our code. So let's go back to Program CS, and here, as you can see, I have updated the code just for the testing purposes. So I've put my DB connection, which is get from the app JSON. I did this to put the variable directly. So now we will command this line and we will enable the next one, which will take our app environment that we have set up on the app service, and we will push the code with the help of GitHub Copilot. This will generate the commit message, and then let's commit and push. Behind the scenes, I already have a GitHub action that will help me trigger the deployment automatically once I've pushed the code. So after 2 minutes 15 seconds, The deployment has been completed successfully. Let's switch to the application, refresh our browser, and the application is still working properly. So let's add a second task. Let's call it CS from environment variables. Put the date and save, and voila. Then the third option consists of securing the connection string into a key vault. So we will take the connection string, store it in a key vault, and then reference the secret ID in the app settings. And that way, the app settings will go ahead and take the connection string. So let's switch back to the Azure portal and check how to configure this. So I have already created a key vault, which is called CS options key vault. We will require a managed identity for our app service. So let's go to identity. And here we have two options, either to enable the system assigned identity or to create a user assigned managed identity. So I have already created a system assigned managed identity for our CS options app service. This will have the name of the app service itself. So be careful about this. Now we need to assign this identity the role in order to fetch the data from the key vault. Let's go back to our key vault. And here we need to grant access policies, whether you are using the access policies or the airbag access policies. So depending on your situation, here let's give it secret get. So this is the role that we require in our scenario. Next, we select our identity and click next, next, and we accept default. And like that, we have granted our identity, in other words, our app service, the ability to get secret permission from the key vault. Now let's go to environment variables, connection strings, and get our connection string value. Switch back to the key vault and let's create a new secret. So I will call it CS string, and this is the value, and we can create it. Then we copy the secret identifier, and then we go back to our connection string here. Then we need to use a specific syntax to reference secrets, copy the secret, and change the value within our app settings. Save, apply, and confirm. Let's wait a couple of minutes, then we will refresh our application. As you can see, the app setting has been saved successfully, and the source is mentioning key vault. So that means that the application will go take the secret identifier ID from the app settings, get the connection string, and reference it in the key vault. And that way, we have secured that our connection string is safely saved in a key vault and only authorized people can access to it and our application for sure. So let's go to our application, refresh, and create a new task. This will be CS from key vault reference. We're still on 27, 2024 and create. And here we go. Our application is able to contact the SQL server referencing the connection string from a key vault securely. Now the fourth option, and this time we will go passwordless. That means we will remove the username and password from our connection string. And this will require some configuration that we will go over together. Let's go back to our portal, jump back to our server, and here we need to enable the Microsoft Entra authentication. So let's set an admin. I will choose my account just to simplify the test. In production environment, usually we create either a service principal or a break glass account, and then we set it as an Entra admin. Make sure that you use an Entra admin account. Make sure that you use an Entra user account. We need to have access to MS Graph in order to be able to add another identities from the Microsoft Entra ID into our database and our SQL. Now that we have added identity here, for the time being, I will not disable the SQL authentication just to let us connect to our database and check the configuration. And then I will save. Now that we have enabled MS Entra authentication, now we need to enable the identity of the app service to have role into or permissions into our SQL server in order to be able to connect to it and communicate with the servers. So let's switch to our SQL Manager Studio, and then create a new user. So this is the syntax to create a new user into the database from external provider. So this means from our Entra authentication ID. So here we need to put our identity, our system assigned managed identity of the app service. Then we will grant it the data reader role, the data writer role, and the DDL admin as well. And as you can see, we cannot add users from external provider when we are connected used SQL authentication. So in order to do that, we need to authenticate with a user from the Microsoft Entra ID in order to be able to do this. So let's switch to our SQL database from the portal and then go to the query editor. And here we will connect as my Entra admin account. So I click on this and now I'm connected. Then I will run the query from the editor itself and query succeeded. So as you can see, my SQL server has created a new server. As you can see, we have created a user and then we have grant it some roles in order to read, write data into our database. So let's check this from the SQL Manager Studio. If we refresh our server and go to database and then check the security, we see that we have the CS options as the user. Then the last step to follow is to go and take the connection string, which happens here. As you can see, we have another options when we enabled the Entra authentication on SQL Server. And now we need to go with Microsoft Entra passwordless authentication. So take this value and let's go back to our, and then let's go back to our key vault in the secret. We will create a new version and here we will paste this and we will create. Let's check the connection string. So here we have the database, the server name, we have the database, and we don't have anymore the username and password in our connection string. And that way we go passwordless with the connection string, which is safely secured into our key vault, which is not anymore required because we don't have any secret into our connection string, but this is a best practice to keep it safe. So let's go back into our application, refresh it, and try to create a new task. So here CS, passwordless CS, 27, again, 12, 2024, create, and here we go. We have created a new item into our database using a passwordless connection string. So the same steps applies for using service principal, a system assigned identity or user assigned managed identity, or if we'd like to use a user account from Microsoft Entra ID or a service principal, whatever you want. So that way you can go ahead and reference the passwordless authentication directly into our application. And the fifth option, which is connect to the SQL database as a signed in user in our front. So let's imagine that we have enabled the Enter authentication in our app service. The user will be authenticated into our front. Then we will delegate to the app service to go and talk with the SQL server using our identity in our place. So this will be using the user impersonation. Let's switch back to our portal and then I will show you how to enable everything. So here in our portal, let's go back to our resource group, select our app service. Then we need to enable the authentication. From the authentication blade, we click on Add Identity Provider, Microsoft. We keep the default settings and we click Add. Once created, we click on it. Then we go to API permissions. We click on Add the permission, API My Organization Users, CS options. We selected, we click User Impersonation and Add Permissions. Then we grant admin consent and we are done. After setting up the API permission, we need to set up the authentication settings on the app service in order to return a usable access token for our database. So let's go ahead and switch to the Microsoft document. In this document, we see that we need to run in Azure CLI the authentication settings. Here we take our resource group name and the app name. Then in the app settings, we need to set up in the properties of Identity providers Azure Active Directory login, we need to add some parameters which are in the login parameters. We need to specify the scope, which are OpenID, profile, email, and offline access. Then our API permissions that we have already done, which is the user impersonation. Then we need to apply the authentication settings into our web app. And that way, the app setting will be able to return a usable access token and use it to authenticate to the SQL database. Finally, we need to update some code into our application in order to fetch the access token from the header, which is the XMS token AED access token. When we enable the built-in authentication on the app service, within the headers, we can get the access token. So that way we can build the DB context from the header with the access token. So this will be updated in my DB context TS. If you go through all the steps, you will be able to enable the authentication from your app settings and sign in as the logged in user to your SQL database. So in today's video, we have learned the different options of securing our connection strings. This goes from the least secure, which is applicable for the development environment, setting the connection string directly into our code or in the app settings in Azure. Then we check how to take the connection string, secure it into a key vault. Then we have learned how to go passwordless by enabling the Entra authentication, removing the user and password from the connection string. And last, we saw how to enable the connect from the app service to the SQL server as the sign-in user safely. So these are the most popular way to connect to secure your connection string. These are not all options, but the most popular ones. I hope this video was helpful. Please let me know in the comment below if you do like me to go through any particular subject. Please do not forget to subscribe and like my channel. Stay safe. Cheers. Bye bye.